Well, hello everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. McDuff Lives 1, McDuff Lives 3, and McDuff Lives on Facebook. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. We got a McDuff Lives, McDuff Bill.
Yep.
Got it?
Yeah, I got it.
All right. And tonight, guess who? Bill Taylor's back for an update on his work at D-State Analytics and keeping up with Governor Murphy. How is Governor Murphy doing anyway, Bill?
Governor Murphy's been very quiet the past couple months. He was giving us COVID updates every week for a while there. He was giving us vaccination updates every week for a while. He seems to have calmed down, or at least he's less likely to seek the limelight since he barely became our governor again. And he was reelected back in November, and but I don't think that the COVID hoax, or whatever you want to call it, is going his way, and his plan to vaccinate everybody is not really working. So he's been pretty quiet. That doesn't mean there isn't stuff to talk about, though, because there's always Murphy's a deep state character, and dug deeper in the past month.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm wondering if we shouldn't credit you to some extent to his calming down. I mean, he's pretty tough guy. He can take a lot of abuse, but on the other hand, you can really dish it out, Bill, on Twitter. So maybe you deserve a little bit of credit. Put a notch on your Twitter handle or something like that. Anyway, that's cool. I know we have to give some people a hard time, and Governor Murphy seems to be volunteering himself as a perfect target fairly often. Anyway, that's him. And what else have you been working on at your new website?
So we'll get back to Murphy, but just a couple of recent articles that I posted that got a decent amount of traffic since I last spoke to you about a month ago. The Uvalde shooting was it prompted some interest in my part, and what I usually do is you see a Texas town, it's on the border, or essentially on the border. It's maybe, I guess, 60 minutes, 80 minutes from the Mexican border. It looks like one of those towns that could be on a corridor town or a terminus town for smuggling, probably for a long time. It just the reaction of the police to the shooting, certainly gives the impression that they're hiding something, and the implication that they're hiding something might imply that they're guilty of something other than being possible cowards. Whenever you see that happen, I kind of think of, okay, what are these cops dirty? Or is this one of those dirty towns that we see in the United States? Not like LA or New York or Chicago, where you have your incidents of dirty cops, but really the small town crooks. So I plugged Uvalde, the town Uvalde, into the Mary Farrell JFK database, which seems to be the most comprehensive database of JFK assassination docs, and certainly a lot of Texas towns will come up, but Uvalde came up pretty quickly, and I think kind of substantively. So Uvalde is a good 3 hours from Dallas by car, but there had been interest by the FBI, JFK assassination investigators in the town. They spoke to a number of people, one of them being the Mitchell brothers, to see if they had any relationship with Jack Ruby. Apparently, Jack Ruby was was connected to a gambling ring in a town about an hour away from Uvalde, a tiny little town. But Uvalde seemed to be the mailing address for a couple of the characters involved in this gambling ring. There's an interesting document in the files that says that a couple of years later, 1967, about that James Earl Ray was making a phone call from a Uvalde phone booth. But perhaps the most interesting, most mysterious thing about Uvalde was Dan Rather, the correspondent the famed correspondent who was in Dallas the day of the shooting, actually was in Uvalde the morning of the JFK assassination. Uvalde, as I mentioned, Uvalde is 3 hours away. It's a good hour away by propeller plane, and he managed to go all the way to Uvalde, sit down for an interview with Vice President Nance, or FDR's former vice president. I have to look and see what the name is because it's not coming to me right now. What's his name? I'll tell you his name in a second. Vice President Garner, John Nance Garner. John Nance Garner lived in Uvalde. So for some reason, Dan Rather flew to Uvalde the morning of the assassination before it happened. Had this interview with former VP John Nance Garner, and then flew back to Dallas to make it to Dealey Plaza to witness the shooting. What some JFK investigators have questioned is to what he was doing in Uvalde, but also why he left it, why Dan Rather mentioned it in his first autobiography, or the first edition of his autobiography, which was called The Camera Never Blinks. But then in subsequent editions, Dan Rather changed the location of the John Nance Garner interview from Uvalde to New Orleans, which is even further away from Dallas by plane. So it's a question that investigators have wanted Dan to answer for years, and nobody's ever gotten him to really come up with a good reason as to why he was there and why he would try and hide it in subsequent versions of his autobiography. I have no idea why he would be there, but Uvalde certainly seems like a corrupt town. All those little towns along the, I believe it's I-83 corridor that runs from basically San Antonio to the Mexican border. There's all kinds of corruption along those towns, and it no doubt has something to do with the smuggling over the centuries, not even just decades, but probably centuries.
That's in. Is that in which state is that in? Uvalde?
In Texas. Uvalde is in Texas, where the shooting was.
I knew that. Yeah, and I've put up on the screen your website, and so folks, you can bookmark that and explore the story more fully if you go and read it there at the state. Is it dstateanalytics.com?
D-State News, d-statenews.com. You'll get it right there.
d-statenews.com. Okay.
Right.
Excellent. One of the things that I mentioned before the show that I would like to get you to refresh me on is a subject you were exploring, say, a year and a half ago, called Sabbatean Frankism. And the reason that it comes back to me now is that I've been, looking into a lot more occult things, especially in old Europe, and would appreciate you refreshing me on who these people are and what their basic, religion, if you can call it that, is, and how are they relevant today? Are there current organizations that are maybe successors or even part of it, or is there like an organized such a congregation of Sabbatean Frankists today? Just because you've delved into it and I have not, I would appreciate your refreshing us on what that means and what it means possibly for trying to understand the things behind the curtain today.
Sure. It gets more complex and more interesting the deeper you dive into Sabbatean Frankism, or Sabbatianism. Sabbatianism was a cult that was started in about 1766 by a gentleman or a rabbi from Izmir, Turkey. His name was Zabbatai Zevi. And there's different pronunciations and spellings of names, but we'll go with the Anglicized version of Sabbatai Zevi. So Zevi decides that he's the Messiah, and he starts wandering the Middle East, I believe all the way as far south as Cairo, Jerusalem, Damascus, all through the Levant, trying to convince people that he is the Jewish Messiah, essentially. And what made him very controversial, because he's not the first person to proclaim himself the Messiah, what made him very controversial is that he says that in order for God to come down and smite the enemies, or whatever God is supposed to do when he arrives, is to take the Torah and invert it. From his reading of it, he believed that by performing indiscretions or anti-social behaviors against what the Torah says, that would bring about the rapture in Christian parlance. This is antithetical to Judaism and in all world religions for the most part, or at least the Abrahamic religions. Is basically be bad, God will come faster. So that's why he was so controversial, and there were many rabbis who spoke against him, but he managed to get thousands of adherents or find thousands of believers. And I'm going to butcher the story a little bit. In 1666, he was arrested by the Sultan of the Ottoman Sultan, and the Sultan says, "Well, you could either convert to Islam, or we're going to chop your head off." And Sabbatai, in anti-Messiah fashion, says, "I'll convert to Islam," which is not what you're supposed to do when you're Messiah. You're supposed to take one for the team. Anyway, he converts to Islam, and a number of his followers didn't like that, so they broke up. But to make a long story short, it's estimated that at its point, by after 1666, there was over 1 million followers of this Sabbatai Zevi fellow, and mostly Jewish, but not entirely. They started to be persecuted by the Catholic Church, by the Sultan, by Jewish rabbis who practiced traditional Judaism, and they essentially went underground. Now, what happened to them is there's a lot of conjecture. There actually is a practicing real life offshoot with direct lineage to Sabbatai Zevi in Turkey. They're known as the Donme. The Donme are essentially Muslims, or they practice Muslim outwardly, but they practice this form of Sabatinism, in their own homes. It's very secretive, because you never know who really is a Sabbatian, because they pose as Muslims. And this goes through all throughout Europe. The idea is that, if you take the broad conspiracy theory, the idea is that there's some Jewish, maybe families, a relatively small amount that secretly live up to the teachings of the Torah and traditional Judaism, or outwardly live up to the teachings of Judaism and the Torah, but secretly practice this inverted form of Judaism, which is antisocial and can be violent, and it's basically antithetical to everything that is a Western norm, or anything that we've gotten from the Bible. So whether there's where it gets very interesting is you have this Donme group, but they're relatively quiet from what I understand, and they're in a pretty small minority. The big question is to whether these sort of European families, these wealthy European families, are secretly Sabbatean. For example, the Rothschilds. They seem to have that bent. outwardly Jewish, but they're certainly um, suspect in a lot of, say, criminal activity that wouldn't be considered kosher by traditional Jewish rabbis.
The Rothschilds are not kosher?
Uh, they might not be.
um, well, that's what I'm interested in, of course, because when you mention a philosophy that basically says you've got to turn the Bible or the Torah on its head and do the opposite of what it says, well, that sounds an awful lot like divide and conquer. It sounds like, well, we've got the good guys all organized, but now what we need is a bad guys team. So let's put together a bad guys team. And how about you, Sabatai Zevi? Would you like to lead this? And let's just get you out there in front. You go around and tell everybody that the way to be good is to be bad, right. And everybody can have a good time being bad. Well, isn't that really what's going on in the world right now? It's I mean, I am astonished at how the institutions, are breaking down their innate sense of morality. I don't like to see these images of naked men prancing around in a parade for families, and I don't care what your sexual orientation is. Why do that? But is there still a kind of a maybe subconscious feeling that they're doing the right thing by pushing us outside of our normal morality? In other words, taking away our fundamental Christian or Judeo-Christian morality and giving us an alternative just right in the face that's going to make a lot of us really, really mad. And is that what they want? Are they doing things to inspire us to rise up, against the structure, as so many revolutionaries have done, and only to get quashed like the French Revolution and washed away in blood? These are ancient European mindsets that have to do with the values of the Middle Ages and the values of the Dark Ages and castles and torture and inquisitions and things that we think in this country we don't have to deal with. But when you consider the things that have gone on and the connections to the old financial systems that have their tentacles so deeply in our institutions, I don't know. I have to think that there are people that think that way, that are in positions of power in our biggest and most influential financial institutions. I guess that's basically all I wanted to draw out of it.
I mean, that's not unrealistic at all. It almost takes a religious devotion to evil to really be this evil in some cases. I mean, greed will take you so far. Lust, any of the seven sins, but maybe you might need to put them together to really bring out the extra level of evil. So some justification that you could also pass down. So you pass down your religion. My mother's Catholic. I'm Catholic. If you want to pass it down as some level of evil as normal or inspired by greater forces, inspired by God or inspired by a God, then Sabatinism and similar cults, Frankism, would maybe fulfill that mission. That's sort of because I think people are innately probably good, and to really sway them and sway generations to do bad, you'd have to have a long-term commitment to it, which you would only find really in a religion. It's not just to pick on the Sabatinism and the connection to Judaism. The on the Catholic side, and some would argue that the Catholic Church has been infiltrated by Sabatines, but directly infiltrated. But on the Catholic side, you would have your Satan worshipers, your black mass uh, purveyors, because everything is inverted. In a black mass, an upside down cross, a mass at night, on a Saturday night instead of a Sunday morning, and whatever else goes on at a black mass inspired by the Catholic symbology and Catholic teachings. There's plenty of people have argued. There's reason to believe that there's a sort of a symbiosis of really these evil Catholic leaders or even laymen and the Sabatine, both practicing this inverted form of morality to get to the same end. And actually, the Jesuits, who are always on everybody's conspiracy list, they were actually accused of the same type of theological abomination that the Sabatinians were accused of. It's called and it's not necessarily an abomination unless it's evil, but they're both considered antinomialists.
Yeah.
And which is that if it's not said in the Bible, the argument of the antinomialists, and I probably said it wrong 7 times in a row, is that if it's not in the Bible, it doesn't mean it can't be done. So from a good point of view, or a ethical point of view, the Quakers were also accused of being antinomialists. But what they would argue is, well, we know there's nothing that says you shouldn't own slaves in the Bible, okay, but we know it's immoral. Okay, we don't need the Bible to tell us it's immoral, and that's why you had so many Quakers trying to free the slaves, and that led to the abolitionist movement. On the other hand, from the negative point of view, the Jesuits were accused of acting antinomialist because they were selling penances, and they were essentially Blaise Pascal, the philosopher Blaise Pascal, accused them of this, and it's similar to sort of the accusations that were made against the Sabatines by the traditional Jewish rabbis of 16th century Europe.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to Rulers of Evil, the book that I read about 6 months or a year ago. That author, Tupper Saucy, really goes into the Jesuits and how the Jesuits are, in fact, orchestrating things from behind the scenes, and they've been doing it for centuries, and how the end justifies the means is really the problem that we have here, because people that want the second coming of Christ to come, or how long must we wait? The Puritans, how long, dear Savior, must we wait? When does this Messiah come? The Jewish Messiah, and you feel like, geez, I want him to come right now. So let's put some pressure on him. Let's start doing some evil stuff. So we get his attention, and he comes back here and gets rid of the evil people, and we all live happily ever after in the new world. But that idea of the end justifies the means is what is behind assassinations. It's what behind secret poisonings. It's behind the false flag events. It's behind the whole idea of do as thou wilt under the Tavistock program. It is all a question of somebody's political will being put into play under a theory of doing good. We're doing good by getting rid of, we're doing good because we are the population that has to lead humanity, and we need some Labans Realm, so let's get rid of all the Poles and all the Jews. That kind of thing. We're going to do this, and yeah, it's going to be icky and messy, and we don't really enjoy it, but we have to do it because we need that room to grow the real good people, us Aryans. That's what I'm trying to get at, is how can we expose the Sabatini mindset behind financial policy, behind foreign policy, behind the Ukraine war? These people in Ukraine seem to me that might very well be living in a satanic type of world with their, it's all corrupt. It's all money laundering. It's all exploitation of the women. Ukraine is famous for prostitution and the shady side of sex trafficking. Sabatini, just maybe that's not the right word for what's going on, but something evil is going on in this world, and I don't know what else to say.
Well, I would argue that it is. It probably it is most likely Sabatini. There's plenty of there's plenty of more evidence is coming out. The Sabatini movement did not die with Zabatai Zevi in, I think so, in 1676. I think it was 10 years after really the height of his movement was when he passed away. From Sabatinism, it morphs into different forms of and splinters. I think there's some argument among Jewish scholars as to whether Sabatinism was really as evil as it's sort of personified today, in that other groups or other cults branched off of it and made things worse. The Frankists is a direct descendant of Sabatinism, and that's where you get into really some very, very evil stuff. And also the mix where sort of the Jesuit church and Sabatinism collide with the Bavarian Illuminati. If you follow some of that.
Oh, I want to know more about this. Now,
well, and I don't know as much as some other people, but the Frankists.
But what geographic area is Frankism? Does it refer to France or the ancient Frank tribes?
It's Jacob Frank. It's named after Jacob Frank.
Okay.
Who said he was the Messiah of Zabatai Zevi about 100 years after Zevi died. So now we're talking 1770s. Okay, we're almost up. We're up into the era of the Revolutionary War and the French Revolution, and the formation of the. I don't know how much to believe or how much is true, but the idea is that the Bavarian Illuminati was formed in 1776 by Jacob Frank, as financed by the Rothschilds, to essentially go on corrupting the established powers of Western Europe and the church. And I haven't really looked into Frankism all that much, but you do find Frankists in U.S. history. Brandeis, Judge Brandeis, I think he's one of the more famous admitted Frankists of the 20th century. So
really,
these people still show up. Brandeis was the first Jewish Supreme Court justice, I believe. Pretty sure it's Brandeis. Another family that are known that is everybody's pretty confident were Frankists or Sabatini Frankists was the Slidell family of New York, and then later during the Civil War of New Orleans. Slidell, Louisiana was named after Senator Slidell, and he's a known Frankist. his daughter married Commodore Matthew Perry, and it's believed that they married another Frankish family. So you start to see these names. These names do pop up.
Slidell is Jewish?
I don't know if he's Jewish, but it's always been alleged he's a Frankist.
Wow.
I believe he's Jewish. He was a senator from Louisiana. I think during the Confederacy, he was Secretary of the Treasury, or what he did, and I actually wrote about this pretty substantially. What I believe is John Slidell. John Slidell negotiated a bond deal for the Confederacy. They're called cotton bonds, where the cotton was pledged as collateral, and the Rothschilds bought the issue, and they sold it in Paris through a firm called Erlanger Brothers. And there's an Erlanger, Kentucky, where by coincidence Wayfair has one of its largest distribution facilities. Wayfair was a big controversial company about 2 years ago. So the idea is that the Sabatini continues up to the present. And I don't know if you could share my screen. I'll show you one of the most interesting things that I think is, it doesn't prove anything, but I'm going to share something.
You can probably share it. Do you have a share button at the bottom there?
Yeah. Share. All right. People will like this. I think you have to do something on your end.
Wait a minute. Oh, I see it. Yeah. Gotcha. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
So this is a bathhouse in Aleppo, Syria, which is basically one of the headquarters of the Sabatines in the 16th and 17th century. That might be a little controversial to say, or I might have limited sourcing, but the Sassoon family was based, or was originally from Aleppo, Syria. And then this is where everybody gets excited. That's the Epstein's temple.
Wow.
So
he could be a Sabatini.
I think I would argue that he is a Sabatini. He's using the symbol. He's using the same type of symbols on his island as they have down here in Syria, which was a hotbed of Sabatinism. And it was.
What do you think is going on inside of this temple here in 1765 or whatever?
So this temple, this Syrian temple, actually predates the formation of the Sabatines, or Zabatai Zebi. I believe it was made by the Mameluke Turks as a bathhouse. Possibly nothing nefarious, but it seems like
So that's not necessarily a Sabatini design there.
But it would be in the Sabatini. It would be when the Sabatini showed up, and to the extent they had any power. I mean, this would be kind of symbolic of where they might do some debauchery. It's a bathhouse, a Turkish bathhouse. I don't think anything good is going on in there, or at least was. It's probably just a museum. I think it's bombed now.
Well, that's where that's what bothers me now, is that there's nothing really bad anymore. You can do anything you want to, it's apparently.
Right.
So, and that could be, you think of a Harvey Weinstein, for instance, and the influence that these people have on people through movies and Netflix and things. Just pushing the idea of immorality as a normal, usual, everyday thing. And that's not the way our government or our institutions were when I was growing up. I've noticed a huge deluge of what normally would have been thought of as immoral and wouldn't have been shown or discussed in public. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I see a lot of intentional destruction of moral values.
Right, and this is so. If there is a coordinated destruction of moral values, and it more or less begins with the Sabatini movement out of this part of the world in the 1600s, with Aleppo being one of the main capitals. It was a trade city. It was where the Sassoon family is from, which is closely aligned with the Rothschild family. Then Epstein's temple, just becomes more interesting. Another temple to debauchery and immorality, based on a temple in a town that is, a traditional haven for Sabatines. At least through the first couple, first 16th, 17th, 18th century.
Yeah, and then the Lolita idea, and geez, anyway, that's.
I mean, you can go down all kinds of horrible paths, but I don't think there's nothing accidental about Epstein's temple and
yeah, and then there's a couple other relationships I'm wondering about, such as the Knights of Malta. We have studied the Knights of Malta pretty intensively here on my channel, and it's the military arm of the Pope, answerable only to the Pope, the same as the Jesuits are. But in fact, the Knights of Malta are more of the acting arm of this enterprise, and the Jesuits are more of the brains behind it. And the thing is that we have in our government, and we've had in our government since I think the 20s or the early 30s, a huge number of men and some women like Clara Booth Luce who belong to the Knights of Malta, even though they're not European nobles. And the original idea of the Knights of Malta was you had to be of noble birth. Well, now we have people who are of CIA connections and OSS connections and old money and old banking connections that never were nobles, but they created a new category of Knights of Malta, the American branch, which I think is run through the Archdiocese of New York. The current boss would be Cardinal Felix Dolan, if that's correct. But it went through the whole term with Spellman, with Spelly, and that was a den of homosexuality and pederasty and just everything you can think of going on in those old Turkish baths is probably going on in cathedrals in this country under the guidance of people like Spellman. That ties to me also, along with your earlier connection of the Illuminati, which is also, of course, connected directly to the Jesuits through Weishaupt himself. So, yeah, I mean, the idea that the Catholics got infiltrated and taken over by Sabbatean Frankists is not that far off, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I mean, just to keep this without touching the thread, who knows if it was the Sabbateans who infiltrated the Catholic Church? It could have been the other way around.
Yeah.
One of the things I kind of find interesting is if you look at that time period. Okay, you have a lot of people proclaiming themselves to be the Messiah, and you have a lot of cults forming. We wouldn't call cults, but splinter religions coming out of traditional Christian branches of religion. I mean, this is the era of the not only the Quakers but the Shakers. All these I can't think of the name right off the top of my head right now. There was another group that there was more than one Christian groups that essentially had their own form of Sabbatianism. It was okay. We want to hasten the return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, in the Christian case. Let's be as bad as possible because we'll get him here quicker if we do. And there's you think of all these Protestant religions that have come and gone. because of crazy rules. But there were plenty of these groups around at the time, and you can't help but wonder if there's. I don't think a lot of the people doing research on the Sabatinians are come from traditional Judaism, and I don't think they're really looking at the sort of the Christian angle of it. And maybe there's nothing to look at, but it was a hot time to call yourself a messiah and say, let's go. It's okay to go have sex with your neighbor's wife. Essentially, what they're all saying.
It's a good thing. Come on.
Yeah. We're all doing it now. Everybody's got it. And the same thing with Islam. The Wahhabis are supposedly a Sabbatean offshoot with the Islam touch.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. And that's I have not dove into that, but it makes a lot of sense actually.
If you can get them young enough, you can convince them that this is the way of the world. The world works like this, this is what happens. And you get them young enough, as one of the evilest people that ever lived, Bertrand Russell, said, you can do anything with them if you get them young enough. It's a sad, sad picture of what's going on right now. What was I going to say? Oops, I lost it.
Well, I was going to say, you can get people to do things for a weird religion that you might not be able to get them to do with money.
Yeah. And especially if you're in the SS or something, and you have to have something, so they come up with these weird pagan things with the torches and everything.
Right.
And there you go. Brings us right back to the color revolutions and the marching.
Well, that's another interesting angle that I think I was going to bring up George when he was in Croatia. Croatian Nazis are believed to have been influenced by the Frankists. In fact, the founder of the Croatian party, I think in the 1860s, that eventually turned into the Croatian Nazis. His last name was Frank, and it's always been said that he's a direct descendant of Jacob Frank. There's a very big Sabatini angle to the Nazis that is probably been not looked at for a lot of reasons, because it throws a lot of things out the window if there really is Sabatini influence on the Nazi thinking.
But there was, whether in name or not, you had Bishop Hudal, who was running the rat line, a Catholic bishop of Croatia, who knew all about what the Nazis had done during the war, and he was putting them on the rat line to Argentina,
right,
and Brazil and Chile and wherever they wanted to go, as long as they had a passport from the Red Cross or the Knights of Malta.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So I think that every single time that we run into this, it's always a question of justifying the evil that somebody wants you to do. And we're just, and my point is, we're you said it yourself, we're not born evil. I like to think of it as God doesn't make junk. Well, I think we have to be taught or trained, as I quoted from Russell, that you have to get them early. But the creation of evil people has been going on a long, long time, from Grimm's fairy tales with the evil witch that lives in the woods and cooks up children for her dinner. And that kind of evil has been part of European legend and stories and probably reality for a long time. But it seems to me that it's all probably run from the top, like the local duke has a friend that does evil things for him from time to time just to get rid of somebody or to control some dispute. The use of evil by lords, by nobility, I can understand that. But we're trying to to create our own idea of a new world order, and that is the United States, where we have a constitution and we have a Bill of Rights, and we shouldn't be engaging in that. But doggone it, it sure is everywhere. Everywhere I look in the media, and the corruption that's going on into children's minds right now, it's unspeakable and it's unbelievable. And who said the only thing needed for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing? And I feel like I'm doing nothing. But anyway, we've had a good talk about it tonight.
Sure. Well, it's an information war. It's not a kinetic war. So we are doing something. I mean, it beats picking up a gun. I mean, that's the only thing you can do is sort of, and actually, I think people are taking this very seriously. There's a good podcast on iTunes, and I hope I don't get it taken out. It's called Forum Chatter, and it's hosted by actually a lawyer who lives relatively close to me, just coincidentally, but from a large Jewish community. And he's done a series, I think 10 or 12 part series on Sabatinism and sort of the scholarship that has gone on in Jewish circles that have really taken a hard look at what Sabatinism is and made a lot of connections that maybe within sort of their own Jewish academic community doesn't get much publicity, outside of the community doesn't get much publicity. But I find it interesting that they would sort of this podcast would form and sort of take this topic up. They talk about other related Jewish history topics as well that are not related to Sabatinism. But if you listen to it enough, there's an undertone to it that suggests that these scholars imply that they really shouldn't be talking about some of these things, but nevertheless they're making the effort because they believe it's important. And if it's not, and at the very least interesting, and they'll argue that they're still Sabatines. I mean, they've spoken about it. They don't name names, but it seems to be an effort to sort of make this known, at least within the Jewish community, where it's a threat, as anything else would be. It's a threat to traditional Judaism. The 99% of Jews who practice, or whatever the number is, practice traditional morals and ethics and what the Bible or the Torah says to do, and not this inverted form, which makes everybody look bad in that smaller community.
Wikipedia. Louis David Brandeis, later Louis Dembitz Brandeis, was born November 13th, 1856 in Louisville, Kentucky, the youngest of 4 children. He was born to Jewish immigrant parents from Bohemia, who raised him in a secular home. He attended Harvard Law School, graduating at the age of 20 with the highest grade point average in the law school's history. His parents, Adolf Brandeis and Federica Dembitz, both of whom were Frankist Jews, immigrated to the United States from their childhood homes in Prague, Bohemia, then part of the Austrian Empire. They immigrated as part of their extended families for both economic and political reasons. The revolutions of 1848 and the Habsburg Empire had imposed business taxes on Jews. Well, essentially, Bohemia, Prague, seems to be a center of Frankist Jews, and that the implication is that Brandeis learned it from his parents and his culture. So, and wow, it's so interesting. Just it says under family life, it says, having been raised partly on German culture, Louis read and appreciated the writings of Goethe and Schiller, and his famous favorite composers were Beethoven and Schumann. In the religious beliefs, only his extended family practiced a more conservative form of Judaism, while his parents practiced the split-off movement of Frankism. Well, I never knew that, and I don't really have a taste for whether that's good or bad in the case of Louis Brandeis. It's been a long time since I encountered him in my legal studies, so I'll have to study him on my own. But in your publication over at d-statenews.com, we can read about a number of these articles that you've been writing lately, and I really do appreciate it. I trust that everything's going well with D-State News. Are you finding yourself getting some followers?
Oh yeah, yeah. I get traffic. It's it's pretty. Actually, if you do Google search, you'll usually find something. It usually come up, and these these talks always help with the traffic. So anybody who wants to go over there and read some of these articles. I mean, I'll just mention we didn't really talk about Murphy, but I did find another connection of Murphy to the deep state. So far, I'm up to about 5, but he's in the context of Frankism and Sabatinism. I would argue that he probably belongs, or his wife's side of the family probably belongs to that really super secret part of essentially associates of the Lansky Group, and which is really a branch of the Rothschild criminal syndicate. But Murphy's one of Murphy's cousin-in-laws showed up in the Sussman hearings, and I wrote about that. And it's worth a read. And I don't think anybody's noticed yet, but one of the guys who was giving looks like false testimony to me at this point mentioned he was part of this ring to get Trump, an expert in security, in internet security or internet hacking. He's a bad dude. So that's my 5th connection, or 4th or 5th connection of the Murphy family to deep state shenanigans.
All right, very good. And let me remind you, if you haven't been with us for the whole ride, Bill's work on Gibson Island alone is worth studying. His blogs there. We started off about in 2019, and we went to see Gibson Island, which is the home of a whole lot of very interesting people, scientists, diplomats, rich people, DuPonts, and a whole cast of characters that are really part of our history and also lead us to some real revelations of how things have gotten to be where they are today. So, Bill Taylor, thanks once again. Everybody, thanks for being with us. And we will see you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, I'll be joined by the 3 ladies of Protecting the Nest. So we'll see you then at 8 o'clock.
Very good.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.